Virtual reality, augmented reality, definitely some of the most hot topics in the technology space. I like to kind of refer to both of them as immersive technologies, as they're not competing technologies, right? So they're different technologies that really hope to drive some core benefits and core values. And some of the main things that virtual reality and augmented reality really hope to achieve is really immersion. And if I were to simply define immersion, that would be as simply put as mental engagement. And there's a lot of benefit and value for mental engagement. If it is just simply for entertainment purposes, when you are more mentally engaged, it is definitely much more entertaining. And when it comes to training or other types of activations where you're educating, higher degree of mental engagement helps you to learn things longer, deeper, and from a training perspective, really helps to scale how many people can actually learn in different ways. Kind of really looking from an HTC perspective of augmented reality, virtual reality, a lot of what I do is not so much about what is Vive going to do. I think we like to take a step back and look at the industry as a whole. When we look at the industry, a lot of it has to do with just consumer behaviors, as well as what is the value for augmented and virtual reality. And one of the things we really run into is there's a lot of confusion between what's what, right? So virtual reality really has the ability to kind of really completely transform your environment, right? So it's a digital environment that really helps you to put you in the situation versus augmented reality, which is an enhancement to your current and existing situation that you're in, right? Your current location. And then you kind of have this kind of loose term of whether it's MR, mixed reality, or merged reality. And sometimes that often terms adds a lot of confusion to when do I pick one versus the other. And I think the easiest way to really understand is it's a great way to kind of use as a catch-all for those terms. But the really important things to really understand is the differences between virtual reality and augmented reality. If our goal for immersive technologies is to create immersion, meaning making sure that you are very mentally engaged, virtual reality does that by recreating or creating that environment for you. And those environments may either be inaccessible, dangerous, or previously just were too difficult for you to even be in, or just imagined. Augmented reality creates immersion by keeping you in the moment, by enhancing whatever you're doing, looking, or experiencing with an overlay of information. Augmented reality also kind of has two different tiers as well. You have headset augmented reality, or you have something that's also a little bit more accessible, which is kind of mobile-based augmented reality. And those are things like tablets or mobile phones. And we'll talk about some of those differences and kind of where the opportunities are between those different categories. And on the virtual reality side, you have PC-based VR, like the HTC Vive or the Oculus Rift. You also have all-in-ones that are coming on board as well, and all-in-ones are VR headsets that don't actually require a PC. And then you also, in the category of kind of VR technologies, you have technologies that allow you to kind of traverse around a room-scale technologies like HTC Vive, versus kind of more stationary VR platforms, more positional VR platforms like mobile VR. And why do all those things matter? Why are they different? Well, we know from a lot of experience, not just with the experience of that from Valve or from HTC, but also from the industry, the more you can do things in real life in a virtual environment, not only the more realistic or the more immersive it is, the more natural it is. And those are very key differences in terms of when to choose one platform versus the other. I think oftentimes is, what am I really trying to achieve? The history of immersive technologies like virtual reality have been around for decades. Even right around the time of the creation of the internet, because there's always been this very tangible value of why do I need virtual reality. The challenge of virtual reality really has been not so much does virtual reality really work, is it really good, it just has not been able to scale. And that's really kind of what brings us into the current state of VR. It is really the consumerization of virtual reality that really has allowed this conversation to happen, this industry growth to happen. And when you look at what does consumerization means, simply put, it's really the ability for content creators to have platforms and distribution channels to create content and for consumers to easily consume content in a manner that's easily accessible and understandable to them. Previously, with virtual reality, you had very expensive installations, few $100,000 and up on these different kind of activations builds. Some are even bigger than this room. And even at those high price tags, there was still a lot of value. And now when you have headsets available at a retail store, really that movement has really allowed this growth for VR. And the reason we'll talk a little bit more about VR than AR today is because VR is it's consumerized. You can buy VR off the shelf. There's already established platforms. There's content that makes sense. Versus AR still has a path that is happening. It's accelerating that makes it not quite consumer ready yet, at least not AR from a headset standpoint. Mobile and tablet-based AR, it definitely has seen that growth this year. So what does really consumerized VR really look like? And for that, a quick video clip.
Oh, yeah. All right, go crazy.
So that awesome mixed reality video was actually created, well, when I say mixed reality, our definition of mixed reality was created by our partners at Valve. And really the way that's created is you take a green screen environment and then you kind of overlay what the person is doing actually in the experience to really help show those that are not in a headset, what does it mean to kind of experience VR. And that's a really great way to kind of help to scale these different virtual reality experiences, as what I do in a headset may be very unique to me. And kind of the green screen experience really allows everyone to kind of see in what we experience. So when we look at the industry of immersive technologies, we realize that it's much more than a piece of hardware, much more than technology. And so that's why HTC has 4 different pillars for Vive. And one of it is from the technology platform, which would be our current Vive headset, as well as the partnership with Google for the next all-in-one headset that's powered by Daydream. And we also look at Viveport as the non-gaming content marketplace. When you're creating content, aside from gaming, there's a lot of need and desire for enterprises. How do I consume this content behind our firewalls? To be clear, so most of the content for Vive is actually available on Steam. Right? And Steam is a tremendous platform, both for developers and for the community that's actually consuming that content. But enterprise customers need a way to find out how to distribute. It may be a niche content, it may be just for a particular customer. And that distribution channel really is what Viveport aims to be. As well as the growth in the area of location-based entertainment. Location-based entertainment is an industry or sector that is like if you go to an IMAX theater, if you go to like a Six Flags Magic Mountain type of activation. And we're seeing a tremendous amount of growth of new technologies being showcased in the location-based market. And we also have Vive Studios. Vive Studios is our first and third-party content studio that we do various kind of content creation. A lot of it allows us to really understand what's needed in the content creation path. And then lastly, we have ViveX. ViveX is our accelerator. It's a global accelerator with offices in San Francisco, Shenzhen, Taipei, and Beijing. It's a $100 million fund. And really the aim of that is we know that as a company, we are not going to always come up with the best and the greatest, as we should not. Even working with our partners, that the community will do that. And so we kind of allow that to happen through our various accelerators out there globally. And really, our first few years, so last year was, I would say, year 1, year 0 for VR, and that really was a very much developer-focused, community-focused strategy for HTC, and in partnership with Valve as well. We knew that the community is really the backbone of a new industry, as well as a new platform. And we worked very hard and very closely with the development community for the last couple of years. This year, we understood that as we are now transitioning into content that the development community needs to monetize, we started to go with the early adopter market. And the early adopter market are those that already have the infrastructure or the hardware to be able to actually utilize a Vive headset. As we look to the future, Before we even get into early majority, we now look to ways to kind of expand the platform. How do you make the immersive environments? How do you make VR more accessible? How do you make it easier to attain? And it's not just us. To make this industry grow has really taken a lot of really big players to invest a lot of dollars a long time ago. And as we see that with whether it's Autodesk or NVIDIA, NVIDIA really working really closely to how do you reduce the cost of hardware and the barriers to entry for that hardware, like whether it's PCs or even chipset technology that's smaller, powerful, and a lot more affordable. And then you also have partners like Unreal and Unity creating tools that allow the development community to create content much faster, much better, and also much more efficiently. When we look at the available market, there's 30 million PCs that are really one upgrade away from being able to run PC-based VR. Now, although that is a pretty big number and a great opportunity, we also understand that that also can be a barrier. Although there's a very large global addressable market of those that can already run a PC, a lot of people don't really own PCs or really understand what it means to own PCs. And that's kind of where we work together with industry of how to go beyond the PC market. How do you kind of show that value? How do you make it easier? And even with the barrier or the seemingly barrier of a PC, we do see significant growth year over year with VR. I'll check this in for a little bit. As you can, and really the key things to take away, these numbers, depending on who you talk to, fluctuate pretty wildly. I like to use SuperData. I feel like they do spend a lot more time trying to actually get more fact-based data. But the key thing to take away about this is 2016, 2017, and even the first half of really 2018, this is still super early days in the market. And even though some early analysts thought 2017 or 2016 was going to be a big year for VR, you don't go from never having a product in the market to a full-blown industry in less than a couple years. If you look at overall trends, the last 10 years of the mobile phone market is where we see the growth rate of VR, which is actually very accelerated, considering how fast previous technologies have adopted. But 2018, we go from $1.1 billion market to a $5 billion market. And then you see the accelerated growth. Well, where is that growth coming from? Content adoption platforms take time. Really good content, more importantly, takes time. And what we're seeing, especially this year, from Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, is that this is the year of POCs for them. There's been a lot of great proof of concepts that have been in the works. And now, as we're seeing some of those things come online internally, being evaluated for further investments, we are seeing more and more interest and commitments to both augmented and virtual reality for the coming years. Some of the barriers to entry can be either the PC, or it'd be AAA content, or just the knowledge of what is AR, VR, and the overall complexities of understanding and implementing that technology. HTC Vive really aims to kind of solve each of those different verticals, whether it's us internally or through the work of our partners. One of the ways we're trying to do that on the hardware side is we're trying to make it a lot easier for consumers to consume VR, trying to make it easy for those that have never owned a PC to walk into their favorite retailer and say, I want this, and the retail associate who also has no experience in PCs say, these things work. That conversation is new, and it has not happened. This type of hardware hasn't happened before. The software, just the tools, the updates haven't happened before. And so we're working very closely with a lot of partners to really get that to the point where VR can be a lot more plug and play, and therefore that barrier isn't quite there. But most importantly, when anybody ever looks at where's the content, where is that AAA content, if you do things in VR, if you consume a lot of content in VR, especially as a VR enthusiast, you don't really feel the need to have AAA content because what you have is pretty amazing. It serves so many great purposes. But from overall market growth, from general consumer growth, content continues to be king. With Fallout 4 VR, what they pretty much did, they ported their existing VR, or sorry, existing Fallout game into a VR experience. And what that really allowed someone to do, if you played Fallout 4, it kind of really allowed you to kind of have that same experience in VR. But what I really like about what Doom VFR did, they took their assets, things that are recognizable in the Doom franchise, and created a new experience in VR, really kind of showcasing how can you do new and different things in this virtual environment. And then the awesome thing about the Sprint Vector experience, which is really made by the folks that made Raw Data, Servio's team, that really showed those early adopters that created quality content like Raw Data had the opportunity, the growth in the industry now to create another piece of content and also another revenue stream for them as well, and also using different gameplay. Sprint Vector is actually a game where you race other people kind of using that motion. And it's a lot of fun, especially considering you can actually use your physical abilities to actually go in and compete against someone. And then with Gunheart, we see that if you're not a AAA title, but you have AAA skills, that also creates a lot of really great content. And I think that's kind of really where some of the other great opportunity in content creation is. It is the ability to take what you know, how to make compelling content, how to make quality content, and make it meaningful in the VR space. With the Star Trek Bridge Crew Enterprise experience, that was actually a new thing for us in terms of how we went to market, because that experience isn't actually for gamers. It wasn't a gaming community that really adopted the Star Trek Bridge Crew Enterprise. It was actually a new group of folks that always wanted to be on the bridge, wanted to have that holodeck experience that previously didn't want to play a game. They had a lot more fun dressing up in costume, hanging out, talking Star Trek speak, but now they were able to do that in first person. And we saw non-gamers put on VR headsets for the first time and literally spend some of the most amount of time, sometimes even hours, in a headset because they were able to finally relive this imagined reality that they had in their minds for so long, and they were able to do that multiplayer. And as we kind of evolved into other non-gaming content, so there's also a lot of great health and educational content that's out there as well that allows you to experience very complex ideas or concepts in a way that's very meaningful for you. And of course, you have Valve. The Steam VR platform is just that. It's much more than a content store. It is a platform. And it's an open platform. And that platform has really allowed not just the growth and the development of whether it be AAA studios or studios with a lot of backing, but really some of the greatest and some of the best ideas in augmented and virtual reality technologies is really the indie gaming community. A large community that continues to meet up, have hackathons, and really figure out what are the really cool and new and interesting ways we can do things in these new technologies. And really touching more on kind of the Steam VR platform. Platforms are really important because they make it easy for new entrants, better entrants to enter the market. And that market creates additional channels. With Apple's announcement of partnering with or using the Vive headset, you actually opened up a very big channel, not just with Apple retail, but also with the Apple development community. And that's really possible because Valve didn't close off their ecosystem, didn't make it just uniquely just for them, or just for HTC, or just for Valve partners. That type of openness, that type of collaboration really is what had made the internet the way the internet was. If you had to go through a few gatekeepers to create content for the internet, the World Wide Web wouldn't be what it is today. And that's a big reason why Steam VR is such an amazing platform to create this kind of open ecosystem. And as we, through ViveX and through other partners, allow this openness of collaboration, allow other folks that may have better ideas or other paths to entry, create new and amazing things, we see partners like, whether it be TPcast or DisplayLink, create solutions to problems that the community is having. Everyone wants to know what's a great way to do wireless headsets. Some of those problems may be very difficult for HTC to solve in a very quick manner, but we allow the community to solve with partnerships likes of Intel and now with DisplayLink to create a wireless solution that we hope to see here in this year. But a lot of the growth in the ecosystem, the ideas, the proof of concepts, what if I did this? It can be difficult for large companies to do that because when a market is new and you look for what's the ROI, what's the opportunity cost, sometimes it doesn't make sense to enter a new market yet. And that's really where the development community is super critical. So what we did this year at CES, we announced we have a product called the Vive Tracker. The Vive Tracker is essentially the tracking module of our controllers. Before the Vive Tracker, to create tracked peripherals, it was very expensive, very time-consuming, and also very difficult. So this really allowed developers literally any developer that had $100 to buy a tracker to actually put it on anything that they want to track and figure out different use cases. And this right now is still available for the development community only. And really what that really means is it's a developer-focused launch. So you see a large uptake with enterprise customers, universities, people just want to kind of figure out how to do new and different things in VR. What we've seen through this development-focused launch is a plethora of ideas of things that people want to do in the virtual environment, much more than HTC could have done on its own, or really any one company could have done on its own. And through that, you see a lot of cool ways to do body tracking, to do other peripherals, as well as things like track tennis rackets, paddles, and all the really great ways to not just use content, but also repurpose content. So you're seeing longevity in content that was created 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, and new ways to interact with that piece of content. And that also increases new revenue streams for the community. VR and retail has actually been pretty big as well. This has been one of the biggest and fastest growing channels in augmented and virtual reality. Why? Because the ability to consume and experience products or complex ideas and concepts, or if you take, for example, very large build-outs of stuff and you have limited retail space, VR and retail has seen tremendous amount of growth in those areas. Notably, a lot of investments by IKEA, Lowe's, and a handful of other retailers as well. And this particular screenshot's from the Microsoft Store demoing Vive. Overall, where are the non-gaming growth platforms? You see a lot in training, design and collaboration, storytelling, virtual showrooms, and virtual tourism. And we'll quickly kind of go through some of those things there as well. And then also, in terms of the industries that are investing the most in VR, you have architecture, engineering, construction, AEC as one. You have medical. You have education. And then you also have, in general, kind of an all-up category, location-based entertainment or entertainment. In the training realm, training has been extremely popular for decades for VR, but now you're seeing small communities like this one in Australia. The ability for these guys, they're training rural firefighters that are volunteer firefighters that don't have the ability to go into facilities and get the full-on experience. So they were actually able to create this virtual firefighter training experience, but they really took it a step further. What they did, they used the Vive tracker on a hose. They actually mounted the headset into an actual firefighter's helmet, and they attached that hose to a hydraulically controlled fire hose mount. So now you actually had the full tension of a fully functioning fire hose, which requires multiple people to do. And then they use their design skills of actually training a team of firefighters going into a fire. And really what they did is, as you got closer to a fire, you had a lot more tension. But as you got closer, they rigged a firefighter suit with heating pads. And as you got closer, it got hotter. Therefore, you really had to think about strategy, because as you get closer to a fire, you have a lot more tension. But now you also have to get down on a knee, which is a lot harder to control as well. And so but when you're down lower on the ground, they actually reduce the level of smoke. So now you are actually trained in these environments and these situations that a rural firefighter could not do. And that really helps to scale and create safer training. And on the right there, you have physicians being trained on new ways, new surgical procedures, new surgical tools as well. And training for medical, or VR and medical, goes much beyond training as well. You also have a lot of pain therapies, distraction therapies being something that Cedars-Sinai has done extensive research on as well, which is another fascinating topic for immersive technology. Design and collaboration continues to be one that's evolving. This is an interesting one in that a lot of people, when you think of collaborative software, the ability to do virtual meetings, reducing travel, increasing interaction, the simplest approach actually works the best in VR because our meetings are relatively simple. In the early kind of proof of concepts of a lot of this virtual software, people were trying to do 3D everything. Every time you had a presentation, a deck, or any sort of asset, they're trying to create 3D models, which is time-consuming and it doesn't scale. But some of the best collaborative software for VR has been ones that you are literally in a virtual room just like this with your avatar, and you're looking at a 2D surface. And that's why that works. That's how you currently consume content as well. And just kind of really quickly, if you kind of even virtual showrooming is also getting pretty big with investments with Audi, IKEA, and Jaguar, the ability to now take a physical mock-up of a car to scale and now really rapidly change all the different options and experiences that you really can't do in 15 minutes at a dealer. One, because it's cost prohibitive, or you just may not have the time to be able to do all those different combinations. And then on the other side, on the design side of the IKEA as well, you can now go ahead and actually either pull in pictures of your home or go ahead and do kind of a virtual in-headset design of a space. Now, all of a sudden, a big room actually has a finite meaning. A tall table actually means this high versus things you may have imagined in your head. And more importantly, you can have a designer in that space with you, as well as your significant other, making sure you guys all understand what big means. And really, to kind of sum all of it up, you see so much growth and a lot of growth continuing to happen. And it happens because augmented reality, virtual reality, there are platforms. They're all new growths of industry. And like with any industries and any tools in industry, it's really important to understand what kind of tool is augmented reality, what kind of tool is virtual reality. When you understand that tool, then you can apply it to your industry knowledge of how to kind of drive that value for your organization, whether it's ROI-based, KPI-based. What problem am I trying to solve helps a lot when you know which tool you're trying to use.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.